Hello and welcome to Unacademy. Good morning to all of you. Before we begin, a very important announcement for you, but a very interesting topic also for us. So remember that the 19999 plus 12 months extension offer is live right now and use the code IAS English to be attributed to our team. Shyam sir is taking economics. The batch is live right now, and it's a very good time to join. As Mukesh sir has pointed out recently, July is your last bus to catch 2026, and therefore, if you are planning to give the examination in 2026, this is the right time to become a part of the course, part of Unacademy. Now, the PPT and the PDF of this session will be in this Telegram channel. Just scan it and you will become a part of it. Subscribe to it. Everything will be shared within an hour. Remember that the PPT is a very important resource which you can use for revision. I'm good. I hope all of you are also quite fine. Okay. Now, looking at the topic, it's a Saturday newspaper, so therefore there's not a lot, there's no text and context, therefore there is not a lot of data or data-driven articles. But we have one which is extremely significant for both prelims and for GS paper 1, along with the gender gap report. These two topics are interesting and heavy. After a small topic related to language issue, we'll talk about what is the unique perspective which has been argued by this article. And then two schemes here and one very interesting development with regards to Swami Vivekanand. I'll tell you what is the connection with 11th September. And this is the set of topics we are going to cover in the next, you can say, 1.5 hours. Now, let's talk about the first article. The first article talks about gender gap report, World Economic Forum, and it is a cautionary article written by no one else but a very important personality within this space, which is the executive director of Population Foundation of India. And she is looking at these topics and this report to argue that we have to learn from it. Now, there's a larger picture here, there are details here, and what we call as a question in the end to make you understand what or how UPSC will frame it in that regard. So, what I will do is I'll give you the larger perspective first, then I'll go into the details, and then we'll look at the question. Now, the article starts with a very, you can say, problematic development, which is that India has not in a way has slid down in the rankings with regards to the global gender gap report from 129th in 2024 we become 131 out of 148 countries, which is quite problematic in that regard. And this has implications for both the economy and the society and also the future of India in that regard. And the first thing which we need to understand is report, that is a static portion, and where do we stand vis-a-vis the different indicators. Now, when we talk about the global gender gap index as given by the World Economic Forum, since 2006, it is trying to give a long term perspective on how different countries are performing with regards to gender on four major indicators. First one, economic participation and opportunity, very important for women, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. Meaning, you have political justice here, you have health, these two together is social justice, and this is economic justice. Justice in the sense of how the two genders are interacting one another. Now, if you look at the 2025 report of the WEP with regards to the Global Gender Gap Index, there are two places where we are performing good, but there are two very dangerous spaces in which India's performance is quite problematic. See, with regards to political empowerment, India is 69th, which is a very good, you can say, space because with regards to Panchayati Raj institutions, with regards to our parliament, with regards to our MLAs and MPs, the ratio is better than other countries. In the same way, if we talk about educational attainment, it is not that out of the box, but it is 110th, and still women, with regards to how they have access to education and what is their educational attainment, there's still some form of, you can say, representation, and you can say a positive light in that regard. But the problem is here, and as the author points out, these are the two indicators which are problematic. The first one is economic participation and opportunity, and the second one is health and survival. In both of these, our ranking is lower than the overall ranking. Overall ranking is 131, and here we are 144th. There are only 148 countries. Only four other countries have worse than us, and 143rd with health and survival. This is what the author points out is problematic in the larger scheme of things, because these two indicators, be it economic justice or social justice, political justice without economic or social justice is meaningless. So, what we've established till this point is two things: who gives this report, what are the four indicators, and where does India stand in these. Within that, two indicators, economic and social, specifically health, are problematic. Now, she is given a lot of data. Health and survival would be that if they can survive, life expectancy basically. Now, she has given a lot of data to support how these two are problematic. But I'll give you first the overarching argument which you can use in the mains examination. And then we can talk about other things if we need to. Now, with regards to health, survival, economic participation, the argument which the author gives is that these are structural issues. If they are not addressed, India's growth story is going to stall. Now, what are the structural issues which are showing up as 144th and 143rd? The first one being sex ratio. The sex ratio in India is still skewed against women, where there is a preference of male child, be it foeticide or be it infanticide, though the reported cases are lower. But if we go into the non reported cases and go at the grassroots level, still that bias is there, and still that issue persists within now an informal channel, may not be reported to the police or to the health department. Second, which he says leads to further issues, is that 57% of all women between 15 to 49 years of age are anemic. And that in turn is leading to lower life expectancy. They are living or dying at a lower age than men in that regard. And therefore, if we look at the health aspect, as much as we have multiple social security schemes and interventions by the government of India, the problem is still at the grassroots level, the impact is minimal. Or we have to go one step further to do something. And therefore, when we talk about sex ratio, when we talk about anemia, when we talk about diseases, when we talk about the infant mortality rate, or rather the mother mortality rate, which is the woman mortality rate, the rate at which they are dying at the point of, be it prenatal or antenatal, which is before birth or after birth, and what we call as micro deficiencies they start to develop, is also not known. So, as much as we have very good intervention, it still needs to go further. And this is a structural issue. But what is more concerning is the economic. Economic indicators are even worse. Women get or are paid one third of what men get, which is they are getting one third less than men. So if we talk about this indicator of wage gap, men are paid, you can say one third extra, and more than that, the pre unaccounted for and domestic work, women bear one of the biggest burdens of this, which is they will work within domestic spaces, they will work within unaccounted spaces. They are also in the informal sector, in which they do not have social security, which then contributes to health. They do not have any form of provident funds or any form of, you can say, economic security, which then compounds the issue of economics. So if you actually look at it, it is not just about the gap report, but it is more about structural issues. So if we talk about the sex ratio, it remains skewed towards men. Their life expectancy is lower than men. 57% of all women between 15 to 49 years of age, according to a government survey only, is you can say are anemic in that regard. Further, they earn less than a third of what men, and female workforce participation ratio is even lower. Overall, they are also not part of the decision and are pushed into menial jobs which are already less paying. So therefore, if you look at it, it is a structural bias. It is a structural bias. First, social against women, and economic. It is favoring men, and the wage gap, along with the sectors in which they are working, is indicative of that. The problem with Bhuvan, the problem with the issue of informal sector and government measures is informal sector penetration of government schemes is lower because it is unaccounted work in either agriculture or in industries or within the household itself. Most of the women are caught up within household work, which is unaccounted for, and it is believed that if we account for it, it would be close to the 2 to 3 billion dollars. But you cannot account for it. Women, if they come out of domestic work and actually join the workforce, it could then have a doubling impact on India's GDP. But the problem is then the structural bias. Then the problem is the structural bias. You all very well know that when women want to come out and work, there are multiple structural issues, social issues, which would not allow them to do it. So they being caught up in this vicious cycle of being in an informal sector, unaccounted for sector, is then leading to this perpetuation of patriarchal notions. So it is patriarchy plus the concept of economic, you can say economics absorbing patriarchy, which in turn leads to something like that. Now, the author does not stop here. She goes one step further. But before we talk about that, please tell me if this is making sense. First thing, which is there's a gender gap report. India is not doing well. He's talking about structural issues. First economic, the other one social, and how she is supporting her argument through these concepts, which is the gender gap report is indicative of structural issues, be it economic or be it social. Are we in the right space with regards to this? It is an argument which is very nuanced. I'm trying to simplify it for you so that you can go further and write it down in the mains examination. You can never write too technical a language in mains. You will never remember it is as it is. So you just have to remember the major trends. Perfect. Okay. Now, we've established that there are structural biases, be it the patriarchy, be it the social structure which is created as manifested in sex ratio. Further, with regards to that, we have economic bias or economic discrimination where women are always paid less and their participation is in sectors where for example they are not paid enough. A very simple and straightforward example of this would be on construction sites. If you have ever been to a construction site, you will realize that the man or the husband is employed as a mistri or a raj mistri or as a labor, and because he is accompanied by his wife, she will become part of the labor, but she is an unaccounted for. She is not paid, she is just helping her husband. Imagine the percentage of women who are in the construction sector who are not paid, and if they are paid saying that because your husband is employed, we are paying you. And therefore, they pay either half or even one third of the amount which their husband gets. Same for farm labor, which is called disguised unemployment, which is that they are there, but they are not getting enough money or they are not accounted for. So, look around you, you will find spaces where, for example, if it's a self employed man, his wife is also sitting at, if he's a shopkeeper, for example, she's also sitting on the shop. But she is not part of the economy, only the husband is. There are structural issues and biases where women are supplementary to the whole structure itself. Feminization of agriculture is a separate issue altogether because of the issue of what is called a single male circular migration. In India, we don't have we have not gone through what is called a structural transformation. What we've gone through or what we have is the male member going to the urban sector in a certain season, getting the money, coming back to the agriculture sector. In the season when he is in the industries or in the secondary, women are in the primary. So, therefore, it is the way we have created this social structure that women's participation in the economy is unaccounted. But what she says further is even more problematic. See, she says that by 2050, India's working population age profile will change. And we will have close to 20% of the population which will go out of the what we call as working population and become a dependent population based on senior citizens. So, with our whole profile changing, this will lead to the dependency ratio to then become even more problematic. Why? With working population going down and senior citizen population going up, this population is going to become dependent on the working population. So, dependency ratio will get affected. But what she argues is, in this larger scheme of things, within this senior citizens, women are going to be there. And if their husbands are not there, they have no real proper educational attainment, they do not have proper economic training, and the society itself is also biased against them. Therefore, her argument is that by the time we come to 2050, where 20% of the population will be out of this, we have a demographic dividend, we have an advantage right now. That advantage will become a curse later. And with our senior citizen population expected to double by 2050, their demography, specifically old women, are going to become highly dependent. Fertility ratios are going down, and therefore there will be a point where healthy or unhealthy, unsupported and not economically active women are going to be senior citizens. And because they have been dependent throughout their life, they are going to then create pressure on the working age population. So if women continue to exit be excluded from the workforce, dependency ratio will rise further and become an impediment in the larger scheme of our development and growth in that. So understand this point, that she is now creating a certain, you can say, structure. Let me bring all of these things together to argue what she's trying to argue. Now, what I'm going to write now is the mind map which will help you in the mains exam. Remember, the data which you see in the newspapers cannot be produced in the examination verbatim. There is no one who can ever do that. You have to somehow concise this data and use it in the examination to produce an argument which makes sense. So, what is the gist of this whole article? The gist of the article is the Global Gender Gap Report has pointed out that India is going down in its ranking. And out of the four indicators, when we talk about political justice, economic justice, or social justice, whilst our political performance is good, economic performance is going down, and social, specifically health, is going down. Now, how do we explain this? We explain this to the issue of sex ratio, to the issue of malnutrition, which then shows in life expectancy. And further, what we see is this economic justice is reflected, or lack of economic justice is reflected in labor force participation. It is shown in them getting one third of the amount which men get. Further, it is shown in the unaccounted work which they do, and it is shown in their decision making capacity. And therefore, all of this is creating, or there are now women who may be in their working age, but the problem is these women will become senior citizens, and when they do become senior citizens, they are going to then be the biggest burden, thereby increasing the dependency ratio. And the working age population is now going to then face the pressures of these women. So the more women go out of the workforce, the more women do not become a part of the economic sector, the working age population in 2050 is going to face a higher dependency ratio. So these women who are in their working age but are not part of the workforce are going to become dependent, and that will create pressure on the larger structure in that. Now, how can PSC ask a question out of? I'm giving you the question. See, this is how UPSC uses an article to make a question. This is directly quoted from this article. And if you have no context for what we've done till this point, you will not be able to answer it. For example, the Global Gender Gap Report is not just a ranking, it is a warning. Unless India treats gender equality as central to its economic and demographic future, it risks squandering the gain it worked so hard to achieve. Elucidate means you have to demonstrate. This is called a technical question, worded in a very, very difficult way. But what it is arguing is two things, or try asking you is two things. How is the gender gap report a warning? Because of the very bad performance. But how does it become a risk for our future? Therein lies this whole mind map. Because the gender gap report talks about health and economic injustice, in turn, it translates into a certain economic, structural, social impediment in the larger scheme of. I hope now you're understanding why am I giving you this gist. Because this gist will allow you to answer that question. What initiatives government is taking to reduce this gap? You can talk about Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. You can talk about the see specifically gender gap is a corporate issue more than a governmental issue. The government can only create awareness, can incentivize the women's participation in the workforce. The government can also sensitize the people with regards to social, wherein there are enough schemes from Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao to multiple, which talk about how women and or girl child should not be discriminated against. But there's no direct matrix or no direct scheme which is targeting these two sectors. Health, there are enough schemes in that regard, but in wage gap, there is need for more intervention in that. The matrix, as I said, are four. Four matrix are there, Chirag. It is based on governmental data. They are not doing the survey themselves. It is mostly based on the data which the government is giving, and it is also quoted here. See, the National Family Health Survey, fifth round, is the data which is used by the WEF, which is the World Economic Forum, to give this report. Rather than questioning the report, as the author says, there needs to be structural changes. I'll ask you a very simple question before we move to the next one. Udan, Manzil, any you can use. But UPSC will not ask you that. It will ask you a more, yes, Anushka, you can use any of them. What I mean to say to you, even if we had not have had this discussion, if I had asked you that there is complete gender justice with regards to economic and social, the answer to that question would have been what? Can we say that we have achieved what we needed to achieve with regards to women in the economic and the social space? Yes, Varsha, you're very right. The answer is no. Now, you are saying this no based on emotion or based on your understanding. Now, you need to support it. This article supports your argument, gives you a lot of data which you can use to write a good answer. Please understand how to read the newspaper. The newspaper is going to give you arguments which will help you in writing a positive or a negative, whatever type of article it may be. So, therefore, this report or this article itself, this editorial, talks about a concept where it is giving you a bigger perspective in, right? Political empowerment, Anushka, we still have. But the problem is not political empowerment, it is economic and social. Political empowerment without economic and social empowerment is useless because then you are just promoting the elite women. You are not promoting at the grassroots level. Okay. Now, moving on to the second article, and this is very, very important for you because this can now come in the prelims examination directly. This concept I have discussed previously also, but when it was in the tentative list, and finally at Paris, the Maratha military landscape or the Maratha fort landscape, as it is called, has now been recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage. Now, there are three things which you should know first. There are three types of, you can say, lists which exist. First is nomination list, which is created by the member country, sent to the UNESCO, that we want to nominate these sites as a certain, you can say, World Heritage Site. Then it is inscribed into the tentative list. Tentative list means that next time when the World Heritage Committee is going to meet, it will only consider the tentative list nominees. And then when it is given a title, it goes from the tentative list into what is called as the representative list. So basically, this concept, Maratha fort landscape or Maratha fort system, military landscape, was in the news close to 2 years back when it was pushed into tentative list. Now it has been pushed into the representative list. And therefore, now we can say that yes, Maratha military landscape is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. or it has the World Heritage tag. Now, what becomes critical is because we are using this word fort system, we're using the word military landscape. What does it actually imply? See, there are 12 forts which together are called as the Maratha military landscape and today called as the concept of, now they are a UNESCO World Heritage. So you have the Salhar, Shivneri, Lohagarh, Kanderi, Raigad, Rajgarh, Pratapgarh, Swarnadug, Pahalna, Vijayadurg, Sindhudurg, and Gingi. Together, these 12 are now UNESCO World Heritage sites. But the question is, why are they so unique? First, you should know that out of these 12, the ASI has conserved some of them, and some of them are actually conserved by the Archaeological Museum Government, or rather, the Department of Archaeology and Museums, Government of Maharashtra. Most of them, or rather, 11 of them are in the Maharashtrian sector, except one which is Gingi. And this is a very interesting, you can say, understanding that it is both coasts. And what is even more interesting is not all of them are hill forts. And this is a very important slide for you, which is Salhar, Shivneri, Lohagarh, Raigad, Rajgarh, and Gingi are hill forts. On the other hand, Pratapgarh is a hill forest fort, meaning it is surrounded by forests, and in the middle there's a small mount on which this whole Pratapgarh is made. Pahalna is a hill plateau fort, meaning there's a plateau between this hill complex where Pahalna is made. Vijayadurg is a coastal fort, meaning that it has one of the walls facing the sea. But what is even more interesting is Andheri, Suvarna, and Sindhu are island forts. It's island forts. And therefore, I will give you the profile of each one of them so that you have some understanding. So let's talk about Lohagarh first. Now, Lohagarh Fort is not a fort which was developed by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj himself, but was captured by him. And be it the Chalukyas, the Rashtrakutas, or the Bahmanis, or the Nizams, or the Mughals, from time to time, Lohagarh Fort actually was under the hands of multiple different dynasties and empires. But Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj used this fort quite well to, as you can see if you look at the image itself, it is very strategically located to understand the topography and to understand and control the trade routes in this sector. So Lohagarh, if you talk about in this list of ours, is a hill fort. It is made on the hill itself. The next one is called Suvarnadurg. Suvarnadurg fort was captured by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj from Adil Shah II, and Kanoji Angre, popularly known as the Shivaji of the Sea, was the one who used this fort to basically have naval supremacy in this sector. So the navy of the Marathas used to be stationed at Suvarnadurg Fort. Suvarnadurg Fort. This is very important to have naval supremacy in an era when the Europeans are also entering into the sector itself. So with the English, with the Dutch, and the Portuguese all in the Arabian Sea, it is very important that these island forts used to control these sectors. Then we have Sindhudurg. Again, this is a island based fort which they established themselves, which is the Marathas established it. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj established in 1664, supervised by Hirunji Indulkar. And the main, most important, you can say, uh, action or strategic purpose of this fort was to make sure that the European influence on the Maharashtra coast was minimal in that. And therefore, you have to understand how these island forts used to play a very important role in the Maratha supremacy in this sector. That is why the English feared the Marathas quite a lot. That is why they did not even want to engage with them until unless Raghunath Rao did not invite them to become involved in this whole sector in that regard. Further, when we talk about Vijayadurg, again captured from Adil Shah of Bijapur, then renamed as Vijayadurg. This is a coastal fort known for supporting the navy of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and it was an important base for Maratha warships. And therefore, it was of the whole, you can say, coastal sector with three island forts together helping to create a certain structure in which the Maharashtra coast was very well, the Konkan coast was very well protected by the Marathas. One of the most important pillars of their power in this sector, which is navy. Unlike, uh, except for the Cholas, imperial Cholas, it is only the Marathas thereafter who understood the importance of naval power in this sector. Thereafter, you have the Khanderi fort, occupied by the Marathas and then fortified. Again, part of the larger complex of coastal and island forts. Then we have Panhala. This was again a Bahmani fort, which the Marathas captured, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj captured, and then fortified further. And this became a very important sector to control the Konkan coast and the again the strategic sea routes plus what is called the internal trade which used to happen here in that area. Do you need to know? Do you need to know the names of these forts? Yes, because previously it was a tentative list. Now it is a representative. One of the easiest question which can come from this area is they can give you the name of four forts and ask you are they part of the Maratha military landscape. The point is not of pronunciation, it is about identifying and knowing the spellings. The idea is you should be able to know that, okay, Swarnadurg, Sindhudurg, all of them. This is a very important area for prelims, and as it is, UNESCO World Heritage tags and sites are coming in the examination. Then, Pratapgarh, again, a very important fort which was controlling a very important pass. So, it was on the banks of the Neera and the Koina River, and the Par Pass was controlled through Pratapgarh. Pratapgarh is a very strategic, you can say, sector. If you control this fort, then you're controlling the whole pass in the Western Ghats itself. Thereafter, Talher, this is was in the news recently because of overcrowding. One of the most difficult forts to breach. It is made on the highest, or you can say the Sayadri Mountains, highest fort on the second highest peak in this sector. And therefore, the way to go to Talher is direct trekking on a vertical climb. So this fort, how it was made, is an architectural marvel in itself. But the point is, this fort allowed the Marathas to have certain spaces which were so impregnable that nobody could enter in that. Thereafter, Shivneri, everybody knows this, is the birthplace of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, very important in the Pune district and has a lot of historical significance for the most important statesman of this era itself. Then Rajgarh, Raigad, two important, two capitals of the Marathas. For 26 years, first capital was Rajgarh. Thereafter, it became Raigad. Rajgarh, Raigad, two imperial capitals of the Marathas, played a very important role in controlling this whole sector again. And last is the one in Tamil Nadu, which is and mind my pronunciation, I cannot do that. Gingi or Gingi, whatever it is, Gingi Fort is the one which is the odd one out here. All of them are in the west. This is in the east. So therefore, what is more important is this whole list. If you can remember this list, you can make a certain acronym out of it. For example, but there are multiple Sal, She, Lokha, something like this. You have to remember this list now. Previously, when it is in tentative, it is not important for the examination, but when it is in the representative list, it is important. So these 12 forts together have now been added into the UNESCO heritage list and are now important for you generally. Sorted. When you get this PPT, please do save this area for sure. Please do save this area for sure, because you will not get this information readily, which is all of these forts, where they are and what is their uniqueness. This can again come in the prelims examination, that out of the following, which of them are island forts, out of them which is a coastal fort, which is a plateau fort. This can again come in the examination. Two areas I'm directly identifying when I will be taking UCAN in the end of this month for the students, which is the current affairs classes for art and culture. We'll have an even longer discussion, but please do make sure, as part of our family on YouTube itself, please do take note of these, and don't have to go into and do a thesis on each one of them, but you should be clear what is their uniqueness, what is their location. Clear, everyone? Can we move to the next topic? We've discussed two heavy, easy, straightforward. Now, thereafter, all of them. Is it important to learn? No, not selection criteria is important. The location is important. The year of being inscribed is very. These two things are very, very important. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Now, the third is a small editorial. And looking at the editorial per se, there are not a lot of points which may be relevant for you generally, but there are 3 points which can be used for the mains examination when it comes to linguistic politics. Comes to linguistic politics. Now, see, language is a contagious issue in India. Linguistic politics in a very diverse subcontinent is not something out of the box. It is quite natural. Cultures interact, languages interact, and therefore, linguistic politics and the politics around language has come into focus in multiple spaces, be it signboards in Bangalore to the three language formula through the national education program, or be it previously in the form of official language controversy, or be it linguistic reorganization of India, or be it the demand which are coming through right now where the word imposition is used quite a lot. And any form of imposition, be it language, be it culture, be it anything, is wrong. There is no doubt about that. It has to be a voluntary, it has to be a voluntary, free will based adoption. Meaning, people can learn languages if they want to, but state action, top down imposition is problematic, be it anything. So there should be no doubt, you should never back out of this argument that imposition of anything is problematic. So the reason why we today have two official languages was because between 1950 and 1965, the central government messed up the process of Hindi's adoption, first by Sanskritizing it, and at the same point of time through very heavy governmental action and top down action. The same states which were initially ready between 47 to 50 to learn the language today are extremely against it. And it is this period of 15 years, the cutoff date which was given for 65. It is thereafter that language politics even became vote bank politics and is also very pronounced in that regard. And with multiple different political parties, be it center state politics or the politics within states or intrastate in that regard, recently we had an intrastate issue where a certain personality was in the news because he said something about a language of the same sector in that regard. The question is that, can we say that government has the right to push the language on someone is problematic. The answer to that is no. The top down should never be there. Now, why am I having this? Is because this article gives you a very interesting perspective on it. It talks about English language, and it says that how English is something which nobody is opposing, and it gives you better economic opportunity. It is a global language, at the end of the day, a colonial language in that. And there are enough reports to argue that teaching in mother tongue is a better way of achieving educational goals in that regard at a very young age. But what is happening is, in this three language formula, in this whole linguistic battle, English is being seen as a midpoint. A, a, the process of decolonization, or the process of how English is basically steering through this Hindi, southern, northern, either eastern, western, whatever language it may be, in turn leads to this wedge, which is allowing English to go through. So the argument which is being pushed is that imposition of any language medium is problematic. English is equally problematic, but nobody is talking about it. Wherein there are multiple, you can say, communities, castes within the southern sector, in northern sector, in eastern sector, in western sector, where they are being imposed English. But because English is not falling into the process of, or in the category of vernacular, or in the process of Hindi itself, it is then being imposed from the top down. And therein, it is a loss for both Hindi and the vernacular that English is being only pushed. So, this neutral stance which has been given to English is problematic. This is the first argument which is being argued, that the imposition of English should equally be talked about. But what is the second thing which stuck out or was very important for you is because language politics, you can easily get a question this year, next year, it will remain relevant. It talks about a Supreme Court judgment which came in 2014 against an government order which the Karnataka government gave in 1994 that made Kannada mandatory till class 4 in the schools in Karnataka. And the Supreme Court struck down this government order, saying it is not valid under the Constitution. That is where Article 19 and 21 comes through. We talk about right to choice. But therein, for a child, having the right to choose which language he wants to study is also part of 19 and 20. State cannot enforce a language on the student. So, the right of the private educational institution on what it wants to teach and what language it wants to use. So, the child and the institution both have a right to choose what they want to teach or what to learn. So, therefore, what this article gives you, not a lot, but is the argument that whenever there is a talk of imposition, talk about the right of choice a child has, as much as you have, as much as an institution has, to which language it wants to teach or it wants to learn. Please do understand this point very clearly, because this is very, very critical. This article is giving us something new to push through and materialize, or you can say articulate in that. So, in itself, this article does not have a lot of substantial arguments, but at least you can use this 2014 Supreme Court. So, we're done with the three big topics: linguistic politics, the concept of UNESCO World Heritage Site, and gender gap report. I hope we all are on the same page. Are we? Yes or no? Yes? Okay, so then we can move into the last two, simple, straightforward. No, sir, now there is no choice. Aman, in most cases, schools don't give you a choice. Even if they're giving you a choice, they're giving you English as compulsory. You may be part of that whole regime that You are allowed to have English vernacular, but English is compulsory. That is also a breach of right to choice. I want to learn Hindi and Tamil. I don't want to learn. This is also a part of linguistic politics, but somehow this is not part of linguistics. English is okay. It is between Malayalam and Hindi. What the argument is, somehow in between, it is going through without or with this tag that it is a neutral language. But the whole point was, when the whole official language controversy happened, it was issue of a colonial language being pushed through to us after independence. Okay, now this is an article which is based on a scheme, and that is why it becomes important for you. You have to remember the scheme, basic features, and you have to remember the objectives. From the economy section, see, Manisha, that is the problem. That is the problem. That is the whole point. English is considered to be important for employability. But it is us who's created this structure. At least in India, we don't need to do it. Globally, it is important. But within India, we should have spaces where English is not considered to be a mandatory provision. So understand this point, right? Okay. Now, this scheme deals, which is called PME drive. This is the first thing which you have to remember. Is now incentivizing. There is a scheme which has incentivized buses or mobility based on electric, to which in Delhi or in Bangalore or in multiple metropolitan cities, you must have seen electric buses. But in that scheme, trucks were not part of it. And therefore, PM E-Drive initiative is now incentivizing electric trucks to be to be bought bought by the government of India, and also incentivizing selling e-trucks and also buying e-trucks. So the major outlay, first outlay is of 500 crores, under which financial incentives will be given to e-trucks under PM e-drive, and a specific outlay has been kept for specifically Delhi reeling under pollution. And therefore the scheme can give you a maximum benefit of 9.6 lakh per vehicle. That is immaterial to you. You just need to know PM e-drive is specifically for trucks. Second, it is based on the understanding that now that mobility has been made electric, also our free traffic needs to be electric based, and therefore trucks which are based on, you can say, electricity, or I'll not call it renewable energy, but at least carbon emission is zero, they should also be incentivized. That is why this is an interesting scheme which the government of India has recently introduced. Don't go into the details too much. You should just know basic feature is incentivizing, objective is to remove or reduce the carbon footprint of the free traffic, that the things which are moving around in that. Now, last two simple, straightforward for prelims, and then we'll wrap up this session. India will host an international manuscript heritage conference. This will happen in September. But why is this important? Is this date 11 September, which has been chosen for Gyan Bharatam mission, is the same date in 1893 that Swami Vivekanand gave that very famous speech, brothers and sisters, universal brotherhood speech, which he, or sisterhood speech, which he gave in Chicago. And in order to commemorate that day, when Swami Vivekanand talked about universal brotherhood, this is now being enshrined by having an international conference where the heritage of the world, manuscript heritage of the world, will be celebrated. So if you've been through the current affairs recently, there's something called the UNESCO Memory of the World Register, which basically documents and gives symbols to multiple texts. Recently, Ramcharitamanas, previously Gita, previously we had multiple different Indian texts which were added into it. This is going to be a very interesting way in which India is going to use its soft power. We are the land of Kalidas, we are the land of Ravi Kriti, we are the land of Amir Khusro, and therefore India has a very important opportunity to use its very rich, very rich manuscript heritage to also hold it as a larger, you can say, body or larger cultural body where we can foster something like this in. This is the only thing which you should know. When it will happen in September, we'll be back again with this, but you should know it is on the same date on which the the Parliament of Religion, or what is called as Swami Vivekananda's most important speech, which transformed into a global identity, happened. Thereafter, the last topic, there is one scheme again or term which I want you to remember. That is RHO this. Rodis. See, when one of the most important or the most lucrative reason to poach rhinos is their horn. So there is a very important, you can say, drive which is happening across Africa also, and this is based on Kaziranga, is that the horn is removed from the rhino so that there is no incentive to kill the rhino itself, which preserves this animal or conserves this animal. And 2623 horns had been cut or retrieved. They have recently been destroyed. But before destruction, their DNA sample is taken so as to understand the species and also its genetics. And therefore, the Wildlife Institute of India has a specific scheme called the Rhino DNA Index Scheme. This is why am I giving you this? Can come recently in the news. Rhodis means or is associated with what? So you should be. We had M strip come, which came in 2021, which is the scheme related to tigers. This can come for rhinos. So under this scheme, what happens is the DNA profile of every rhino horn is kept for further analysis and identification. So if you look at this whole, you can say, session, 4 to 5 terminologies are very, very important. Rhodis, very, very important. UNESCO 12 forts, which we've discussed. Further, Article 19 and 21 in the language angle. Further, we've talked about the World Economic Forum and its Global Gender Gap Report. We've also talked about how there is a 1893 reference to the September 11th manuscript mission. And over and above that, we have also tried to understand how there is PM drive. If you can retain what I've written on this slide, then you're sorted. And this is what has to be retained in the larger scheme. So I hope that this session has been fruitful. I will see you tomorrow, Sunday newspaper, where we will have FAQ. So that we will have at least a whole roundup of the week in that. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.